right, we have been practicing our 1-point perspective. So now we're going to talk about that spatial relationship of all the elements that we put in the picture or in the flat piece of paper. How do we make it actually look three-dimensional, like you can walk down the street, for instance? So we're going to play with blocks and shapes that look kind of buildings and put them on a street and show you how that space works. Couple things to think about. If you have a building, it has to be sitting on the ground, right? We're not going to talk about floating buildings. We're going to talk about buildings on the ground. The horizon line is where the earth and the sky meet. So this part of our picture plane below the horizon line is the actual ground, okay? And above the horizon line is your sky. So if I have buildings that have to sit on the ground and I want them to look like they're on the ground, they have to be below that horizon line. The base of the building has to be below that horizon line. But if I want the building to be tall, it can go above the horizon line, but the base of it has to be on the bottom unless it's a floating building, which we're not going to do. So think about that. The other thing I want you to consider is that if I have a street right here and I'm in a helicopter and I'm flying into the city, I can look down and see the tops of the buildings, right? I can see those. So the tops of the building would be below the horizon line. But if I'm down in the street and I'm walking down the street, when I look up, I don't see the tops of the buildings. So that means the tops of the buildings have to be above the horizon line. So remember, that vanishing point is where your kind of your viewpoint to the viewer. So you want to make sure you're aware of where you're drawing your shapes. Okay, so let's start with simple squares. If I'm going to draw a box, okay, actually I'm going to start by drawing a street to give us kind of an idea or a sense of space. So we're going to go ahead and draw a street. So this is just a little street that's going way off in the distance, right? So I want to put buildings on this side and I want to put buildings on this side. So I'm going to start by drawing the shapes of the building. So first I'm going to draw a big building. So I want it to be in the foreground. So the base, the closer to the edge of my bottom of my paper, the more in the foreground it is. The more to the horizon line it is, the further away from me it is. So let's draw a big building. It's going to go above and below the horizon line. And I'm going to actually have it go off the page here. Okay. All right. So this is my first building. I have to draw this to the vanishing point. So everything that's on the side, those points, just like we've been doing with letters, are all going to go to the vanishing point. So this one's on, below, and above the horizon line. So therefore, I don't see the top or the bottom, but I do see the right side. So now I'm not going to have a building that's this crazy long, you know, even the FedEx building's not that big. So I've got to give it a back. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to draw this line. I'm going to make it a kind of a smaller building. And I'm going to draw this line. This is like a tall, skinny building, maybe like a downtown building. Okay. And now I'm going to take this, erase my working lines, erase as you go. I cannot stress that enough. All right, so I have my first building. And it's because the base of the building is down in this area, it's going to feel like it's in front. It's in the foreground. But I want to make something that's in the middle ground. So let's do this again. This time I'm going to have that building get closer to the street. And so I'm going to draw where this building is being overlapped. So I'm going to draw the line here. I'm going to come up. This is a short building. So he's going to be below the horizon line, even though he is next to this crazy tall building. So I can make my point here. So now as I go over here, I'm going to draw to the vanishing point. Same thing we've been doing. But this time, the building is below the horizon line. I'm either in a plane, a helicopter, or on a building, and a balcony in a tall building, but I can see the top of that building. So I need to come over here, and I'm going to decide where the building ends. Let's say this building ends back here. So I'm going to come over here and find my corner, and I'm going to draw this line. Okay, so I'm going to erase that. So again, not done. Right now I have a building that's going, miles and miles and miles back to that vanishing point. Well, that doesn't make sense. We don't want a building that big. So we're going to draw the back of the building. And come over here. I'm going to make this little skinny building. I'm going to do it again. From here up. Erase as I go. And now I have another block that looks like it's behind this one. I'm going to make a tall building, keep going back. Keep doing this. We're going to keep going back. This time I'm going to draw the building here. It's going to go above the horizon line. And it's actually going to be tall over here. So I have to draw the bottom of my building. And one thing I'm doing is I'm lining this up with the horizon line. You really want to make sure these lines are horizontal, vertical, or going to the vanishing point. That is the trick here. Everything needs to be vertical, horizontal, or going to the vanishing point. So notice that I'm constantly checking my lines to make sure that they are parallel. That's how you keep a building from not looking like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, so I'm going to draw to the vanishing point. To the vanishing point. Notice how my ruler is getting steeper. The closer I get to that vanishing point, the steeper that line gets. So you have to trust what you're doing. You cannot make it look right. You've got to trust it, because when you get a building that gets really close to that vanishing point, it's a super steep line. But if you think about it, when you're looking down the street, you see less and less of the side of now I got my cat interfering here as I draw that line. And now let's erase. So again, everything is parallel. Everything is parallel. All right. So notice that I have one building that's on top of another building on top of another building. This one was above the horizon line, so I do not see the top of the building. This is below. I don't see the bottoms. But everything facing the street is going to the vanishing point. Everything facing the street is going to the vanishing point, okay? That overlapping helps it feel like a three-dimensional space. But the placement also makes a difference. So the placement down here is foreground. This starts to be more middle ground. This building is really still middle ground, and I'm going to show you next how we can add a bunch of tiny little buildings in that back little space that is right there. So if I keep doing this, if I keep adding lines, I'm going to add a bunch of lines. And I'm going to line them up different spots. And it can get really close and really tiny, and I'm going to show you how you can make a bunch of buildings. So here is the front of the building, and then this line's got to go to the vanishing point. Look how steep my ruler is. But I'm going to trust the angle. I'm going to trust it. And this goes to the vanishing point. Now I have another tiny building. Let's repeat that process. When I come back here, this is horizontal. This is horizontal. And again, this guy goes to the vanishing point. Very steep to the vanishing point. And I can repeat this until my pencil just won't add any more. And visually, what happens is we start to see them disappear in the background. So it's actually very simple, but you got to follow the rules. And the trick for it to look really nice is that these are all horizontal. These guys are all vertical and parallel to one another, and then you really start to feel like you have a street going on. And the same thing applies on this side. You could do that same thing over there. And I'm going to do that on high speed. All right, there you go. So as you're doing this next part of your lesson, you're going to really focus on your space placement. That's going to be the number one thing that we're looking at, is your space placement. Closer at the bottom is your foreground, and this area is your middle ground. Closer to the horizon line is your background. So, and all your buildings need to be below the horizon line, the bases of them, so that they look like they're sitting on the ground.